Hi everyone, it's Martha Novak, and this is a show called Real Talk with Martha Novak, where we discuss all sorts of things related to consciousness, how to live in the world easily and effortlessly and well, and with self-empowerment and consciousness. So we're glad you're with us today. We are talking about, and this has been a series, it started I believe last week and it's going to continue probably. I think last week was episode 2 of it. Anyway, we are moving on with episode 3, and I think we might have to do another one because there's a lot of material here that I think is really important for all of us. Now, we're not talking about parents that are total narcissists, although that fits into what we're talking about. But we're also talking about people that have narcissistic tendencies, and a lot of people do. We're going to be talking about all that today. I'm glad you're with us. Let's do a prayer, get us all on the same page, and then we'll launch into our material today, okay? Glad to have you with us. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much for the opportunity now to excuse me, I'm getting a dog from behind my back, with the opportunity to be together and to learn new things about ourselves and others, about how your glorious world works and how everything is energy and how to work with that energy for a better life. We thank you so much for all of this, dear God, and we open ourselves to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment. It is in all of us, and we now open to know that. Help us hear what you would have us do. But we are giving up something right now, which is our need to know everything, that you may speak to us about the next step. We say, in all gratitude, we know nothing. For it is the you through us and through all things that know it all, and we're listening to that. We thank you so much, dear God, for all of this. And we say this prayer now in your name and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to the show. We thank you so much, and so it is. Hi, guys. See you all clicking in over there. I'm delighted you're with us. Okay. We are talking about, I'm going to say this again because I think it's really important, self-absorbed parents. That's the theme here. Not narcissistic parents, although self-absorbed parents can be narcissistic, and they can have narcissistic tendencies and not be out-and-out diagnosable narcissists. I think this is really important because some of these characteristics, some of these things that a parent like this passes on to the child, we have to be open to. So if you say, oh, we're just talking about parents of narcissists, you kind of say, that's not me. My parent wasn't a narcissist, but everybody in the world has narcissistic tendencies. And I think it's really important to free ourselves from old limitations and to find out who we are in our authentic best, which is, by the way, our potential. It's very important for us to look at this realistically and not sugarcoat anything. Many times I want to, I don't know why my computer's beeping, but it seems to be. I had a client this week who, when I tried to talk with her about her parents neglecting her, she said, oh, yes, but my mother was so pitiful because she had a limited education and she did this and she did that. And I said, it's really too early to put that kind of forgiveness on top of things. Now, her mother was her only safe parent. I do want you to understand that. And so she's bound around this mother. But the mother was a victim and an incredibly neglectful mother. And so you're going to hear about that in this talk, about how you build around the victimhood of the parent. And that's certainly one of their self-absorbed avenues they can go down. And because her self-identity is mixed up with this, she is bound still to the mother even as an adult. And guys, I'm all for forgiveness when you get down the road and it's time for it. But if you are saying, oh, I forgive everybody, before you've ever gotten to what this did to you and what your limitations are and what you're trying to heal, it's too early. It's just too early. You know, I grew up in the theater. And when I was teaching theater all the time, because I had an acting school at one time, here's how this looked at acting. Oh, people were thrilled to do, say, a Russian accent or a French accent. And they put the accent on, but they hadn't found the character yet. And I'd have to say, throw that away, find the character. At the very end, put the accent on. That's the only way to do it, right? They did that with Southern accents, with every kind of accent. You can't do that, guys. So that's a silly little example of something that's really quite serious here. You got to get to your stuff. You got to be self-aware to have any kind of consciousness at all, you see? All right. I do urge you to go back and listen to the prior shows on this, certainly last week. It'll catch you up. We're working with, right now, the first article we're working with is 10 Signs You May Have Been Raised by a Self-Absorbed Parent. This is by Deborah Kerslake. Deborah Kerslake, Kerslake. Now, I want to read her list. This is how I started last week's show. And then we're going to go on with some of the things that she has to say. And, of course, I'll chime in with some of the things I want to say, too. Number 1, you don't feel like a valuable person. Number 2, you feel anxious a lot of the time. Number 3, you're never very confident about decisions you make. You tend to ask other people what's the best thing to do. Number 4, you wonder if you're being too sensitive. Number 5, you sometimes feel like everything you do is wrong. Number 6, you always assume it's your fault when things go wrong. Number 7, you apologize often, even if it's not your fault. 8, you have a sense of dread or that something's wrong but aren't able to identify what it is, so you feel on edge most of the time. Number 9, you make excuses for your parents' behavior. That's what we were just talking about. And number 10, you try to make everything okay for everybody else. And by the way, that's at the expense of you. So I'm hoping some of those things ring true, if they are, because it's time to talk about them, get them on the table, see what you're doing, and get beyond these things so you can have a better life. We'll talk about that too. So picking up where we left off in this article, before we go on to 50 more. Okay. Deborah Kerslake is talking about primarily narcissists. I want to open this up and say, let's not do that. Let's talk about not only narcissists, but narcissistic tendencies in parents, in everybody, so we can spot these things more clearly instead of shying away from a word, okay? Everybody has narcissistic tendencies. What do you think the social media is filled with, right? What do you think selfies are about? Come on, guys. We've got to wake up to the fact that we've got quite the narcissistic society right now. I just think that it's really fascinating to speculate sometimes when you're sitting around with friends on what caused this through the years, but nevertheless, we're here. I tend to think that the more pressure we have on ourselves, the faster this world goes, the more technology advances in all fields. The less we are connected to ourselves and to each other, by the way. So I think that what happens is in our quest to make everything right, we tend to overemphasize the ego, child's mind, and the self instead of doing what this pressure in the world is designed to do for us, which is to make us look within. If you'll look at it, I wrote a book called The Life You Want. You can get it on the internet. And in that book, I said, you used to, I was reared as a child in the 50s, and I'm going to tell you, we were taught to rely on the company, on the church, on the parents, on this, on that. There's nothing to rely on now. The government is suspect. A company is suspect. The church is suspect. Guys, come on. What do you think that means? That we're going to hell in a handbasket? Well, that's what a lot of people believe. I don't happen to believe that at all. I think it is a call for all of us to turn within. You see? I think this is an age of individual consciousness. And I say, good morning, Sheila. Oh, I'm so glad you're with us today, darling. And I say in the book, first line of the book, as I recall, is this is the age of individual consciousness, and what you do right now with this determines everything. It certainly determines whether your life is happy or not. So it's a matter of turning within instead of complaining about all the things without, right? I think that says it right there, is those things are without. Okay, double entendre. Going back into Deborah's article, she says, since narcissists are so focused on themselves, again, this is people with narcissistic tendencies. I'm opening their article up some. They often find it difficult to give anybody else the time of day, any attention, any caring, and they often ignore their children. Sometimes these children are routinely left with nannies and older siblings. And now that you are an adult, if this was your life, you may struggle to phone your parent to see how they are. Or you notice that when you do talk to them, they don't listen. And they don't like to take your advice if they ask for it, even if they don't ask for it. You may not want to visit them anymore. You understand? Whatever the case, this indicates a pattern of neglect, you see, and it'll affect the way the adult child feels about him or herself. So, because it affects how you feel about yourself, it also affects how other people treat you, how you allow them to treat you. We grow up thinking we deserve to be treated in the way, deep down, now this is deep down inside, this is not in our conscious minds, right? That we deserve to be treated the way we were treated. That's not true. We may be used to be treated that way. We may find it, we may have normalized it. Oh, everybody does this. If you want to know about normalization, by all means, listen last week. You may have generalized it. Oh, all men treat you that way. All women treat you that way. These things are issues, guys. And for example, if you were treated by being, if one of the ways they treated you in your childhood was being ignored, You probably are going to find that if in a partner that they will ignore you or not respect you or not accept you or not accept your values. We find friends and partners who exhibit the same kind of behavior as our parents many times. And why do we do that? It's because it's familiar. Familiarity is a really important word here, but I want to go beyond what she's saying. Every part of you cooperates in bringing somebody in just like your parents until you wake up. Well, now let's talk about that. The ego child's mind, and again, those of you that might be new to me today, ego child's mind is the part of you that still thinks like a child. You've got the ascended mind, the adult mind, the higher self mind. That's the part of you that certainly is the authentic part of you, okay? So here's what I'm saying. All of you, both those minds cooperate with showing you that you've got a problem. The ego child's mind brings it in, yes, because it's familiar. You bet it's familiar. And even if you're not happy, you know where the rocks are. You know where the rocks in the water are, even if it's not clear sailing. The higher self cooperates. It cooperates because it's hoping that you will look at it now and get through it and get on the other side of it and have a wonderful life. It gives it to you to challenge you, to say, come on, you can get through this now. So if you think you're going to avoid not looking at your stuff, you got both minds cooperating with your growth. And that's the good news. And the good news is also that you can get through it. Yes, you can. Okay, moving along. Someone who is a narcissist, so who has narcissistic tendencies, can have incredibly hurt feelings. So this is the way parents that have these tendencies can manipulate you, because they'll feel slighted all the time. I know that one of my dear clients was telling me that when she finally decided to get out of the house and go to school, her mother was furious at that, because her mother had trained her to take care of her. That's what she was supposed to do, not have a life of her own, not eventually find a lovely husband and get married. Oh, heavens no. It was all about the mother, you know. What kind of mother doesn't want the best for her kids? Woo. Okay. So somebody that plays this game it's very, you keep in mind, some of these things are very overt and some of them are very, very insidious because they're implied. And what makes it even worse is that you've normalized everything, so it's just, you don't even listen anymore, right? You don't think anything's wrong with what they're saying to you, but there is. Listen to this. She gives an example of, you say to your mother, my mother-in-law gave me a lovely birthday gift, okay? And she says back, well, I've given you a lot of beautiful gifts, haven't I? There's no winning with them or making you happy. Really? Okay, so you've got to understand that these people are working you. And it's really important to wake up to that, because there are a lot of people that manipulate you in this world, and you've got to wake up to the manipulations. If you were manipulated when you were a kid, you're not necessarily seeing it in the real world. And that makes you vulnerable. So it's really important to wake up, right? To realize also that you're manipulative and stop it. Because that's not taking a chance that you can be loved just as who you are. And you can. Okay. Another thing that I think is important to accept that she brings up, and I think this is important, you can't change them. You can't change a parent that is narcissistic or has narcissistic tendencies. You can't. So who can you change? Just you. Just you. To make sure that you're not attracting this anymore by not playing this game anymore from the inside. You can only be your own self. You can only accept the truth of your parents. And go on. There's always a need, by the way, to release some of the emotions that you've had over the years. They keep you stuck. But everybody has the opportunity to rebuild themselves. I think that's marvelous. We can all rebuild ourselves. And why? Because these ideas we have in our head, these things that we have accepted as truth, and our parents have told them, and boy, do I have a lot of those lists, aren't true at all. They're not true. And you've got to challenge the untruth of those things, you see? They are also nothing but energy. They're just puffs of air. They're not substance. They're based in lack, and you can get beyond them because they are energy. They're illusions. You see? Okay. The thing that makes this hard, though, a lot of times is that you have built a definition of self on these things. You have over-identified with them and over-sympathized with them. Over-sympathized with the mama that didn't have much education and did the best she could. She was a classic victim, and now you are too. I say that and put it on the table. You want to live that way? Time to do something else. Okay. When your self-identity is tied up with something false, it's harder to get through. Can you? Absolutely. That's what I do for a living all the time, get through people through this. But I'm going to tell you it's harder because who are you if not this? Well, you're much, much more than this. Okay? But that's the difficult thing. You over-identify with this. You over-sympathize. You've got a definition of self wrapped around it. It's you. But it's not. It's the false self and not the true, beautiful, loving child of God that you are. So we have to gain some understanding, don't we? We do. We have to gain some understanding of this and bring it to our conscious minds in order to work ourselves out of it. Now, here's something interesting. At one point, after you have thoroughly looked at your upbringing, you're going to see that who you are is totally beyond any kind of parenting you got. And now the only thing that's left for you is to parent yourself well as the beneficent parent and to have a fine life. So all of a sudden, in the advanced stages, it isn't about your story anymore. We're going to throw it away. What is there left to know? It's going to bore you to smithereens. Now that's when, right after that, is when forgiveness comes. Okay? Because if it comes before then, guys, you're putting it on too soon. It's just lip service. And to really free you, you have to realize your parents had the very life they wanted to have. Now, the only one that's not having it is you. The life you want. Nothing has been your fault. Nothing has been your fault. So you've got to allow yourself now to wake up to the fact that you're a worthwhile person, that you have things to say, that you have a right to make decisions for yourself, and it's fun, that you have a right to have gotten it wrong all your life. It's all part of getting it right now and waking up and seeing the way it really is. It's all one big continuum. But what we do a lot of times, thank you, sweetheart. What we do a lot of times is we'll compartmentalize. Oh, if I accept this new way of thinking, it disqualifies my whole life. Let me tell you, of course it does. Shouldn't it? It's all part of the same thing. The ego child's mind energy results in the higher self energy. If you didn't have one energy, it couldn't change into another energy. It's all transformation of the same energy. Isn't that wonderful? So is there anything to beat yourself up about when you're little? Of course not. Is there any reason for you to say, oh, I shouldn't have, done this. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have believed my mother and father. Oh, No, you should have. Kept you alive at one point. Do you need it now? No. It's all part of your growth, your change. And by the way, your optimism, that's going to take place too when you cross the line and start playing in the fields of your own potential. Yep, it's just true. Okay, now, I want to go to another article. This is a really good article. All of these are really good articles. This one is by Christine. Oh, hello, darling. Hello, Jean. Oh, well, I agree with that. I don't know whether this is Jean or Jean, but anyway, he or she says, I disagree when you say nothing is your fault. When the victim becomes the monster, they are absolutely responsible for their actions. I agree with that. I agree with that totally. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking about you as the person that is, this is a show on consciousness, right? This is about getting over that and not becoming the monster. Okay, there's a monster in all of us that we could embrace. But that's not what this show is about. The show is about change and growth and opportunity and becoming the best self and adding that and the value that is intrinsic to that to the world. So that's what the show's about. Thank you so much for your comment. I appreciate that very much. This is an article. Oh, honey, thank you. And is it Jean or Jean? I don't know which one it is, but let me know, okay? Because I want to call you by the right name. You have a beautiful name, by the way. So this is Christine B.L. Adams. She's a doctor, and she has written an article called The Effects of Self-Centered Parenting on Children. The subtitle is Growing Up with Self-Absorbed Parents Can Be Hazardous to Your Health. Oh, thank you. Oh, you are Jean. Okay. Thank you, dear heart. Very nice. On Facebook Live, where you all are writing in right now, because we're also broadcasting over Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio, I think, goes to just this country, but Facebook Lives goes all over the world. So I have people writing me from everywhere. So I want to make sure that we pronounce things according to your culture. Thank you, Jean. Appreciate knowing that. Okay. Christine B.L. Adams. So I thought this was a lovely article. Really, I did. The subtitle is Growing Up with Self-Absorbed Parents Can Be Hazardous to Your Mental Health. So, she says that a lot of times children can be an extension of their parents. That in their parents' mind, they're not an individual. They're just an extension of the parent. And I absolutely agree with that. So the child's mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual needs are neglected. If you understand. It's all about the parent and the self-absorption. Their needs go unmet. Now, she goes on to say that when you have a self-absorbed parent, everything revolves around them. The relationship is one-sided and directed by the parent. And I think that's really important to know. I mean, it's kind of obvious, isn't it, that it's directed by the parent, but I think those words need to be said. It's directed by the parent. The kid has no input at all. Such a parent enlists the child in caring for and catering to him or her. This creates a role reversal relationship that is inappropriate for the child's growth, development, and welfare. And it is inappropriate. And let me go on to say, there is age-appropriate training throughout a child's life. If you want to know more about that, it's all over the internet. You can read about age-appropriate training. What a child should learn at this point in their life, that point in their life, at this age, and at that age. But you're not getting any of that when you've got a self-involved parent, because it's all about them. Not about the kid, not about the age-appropriate training. And this is actually training that is absolutely inappropriate for the child's growth. When you come out of the womb and you're in charge of that parent, taking care of that parent, making sure the parent's healthy, making sure the parent's happy, making sure you're doing exactly what they say. Okay. Such parents actually are manipulating the child to ensure several things. One is that the admiration stays on the parent. All right? And they will tend to lack any kind of empathy for the child's emotional needs. And they will show jealousy, as I said before about that other client of mine, when any steps are taken toward individuation. What? You're not taking care of me? And then they'll play the card of, guilt. All right, trying to get you to respond to them. Something else I want to put on the table that is occurring to me, and that is this. People that are narcissists, have narcissistic tendencies, usually are very interested in people that are successful. That's really all they are interested in. So if they are the president, the CEO of a company, they hire people that are semi-famous, like sports figures or something like that. They want to attract people that are of a better quality. Why? Because they think better quality, by the way. Why? Because they don't have a real strong sense of self in themselves, so they surround themselves with people who, so they can, look better themselves. And they do the same thing to their children. That's why they, instead of finding out what you might be interested in and supporting your successes and your failures as you're trying to find that out, they drive you to look good so they can look good, you see. What a child is not related to, though, as an individual, a separate person from the parent. And by the way, Toffel, excuse me, I'm sorry. We have Michael, please. My husband's Austrian. Yeah, Toffel, come. We have squirrels on the porch. Almost too much to ask a little dog to be quiet when there are squirrels on the porch. All right. There is a point in development. I should have looked this up. I did not. But in age-appropriate training, I think it's 2 years old. I may have that wrong. But it's when the child is separating from the parent. Suppose that's not allowed. You see? All of a sudden, suppose that's not allowed. There are many emotional and psychological consequences for the child when they don't get to separate. When a child's individuality is disregarded, she goes on to say, it affects self-esteem and confidence. Low self-esteem, in turn, can create anxieties and depression and suicidal thoughts, substance abuse, and even runaway behaviors. Now, we're going to talk about kids for a few minutes. And then we're going to talk about the adult ramifications. Okay. Children respond to self-centered parents differently based on the child's personality style. Some things affect a child even more than might affect another child. They may go in different directions. This style is created by how a child is emotionally conditioned within the family. So, this is something that I think is just fascinating. The research that's been done on this has discovered that personality styles fall under two types: omnipotent and impotent. Omnipotent and impotent. So let's talk about the effects on omnipotent children. We'll define what that means too. Omnipotent children try hard to satisfy their parents. The omnipotent label comes from the child's unconscious belief that he or she is psychologically strong and able to fulfill the parent's needs and requests, no matter how inappropriate. The interesting thing about this is that's a bit of narcissistic tendency as well, isn't it? Already in a kid. And I know several children like that. I mean, several adults like this now that had this kind of childhood. Even as children, they knew their parents were out in cuckoo land. They felt they had to pick up the slack here. Such children are trained to be emotionally attuned to what the parent needs and wants. It's a tall order and impossible job to do, but they plunge in and do it anyway, try to. A child with an omnipotent personality acts as a complement to a self-focused parent. The omnipotent child will attempt to care for and meet the selfish parent's needs and desires, every one. This author goes on to say, since omnipotent children strive to do what dad wants and be what mom demands, they're going to fall short. They're kids. Selfish parents ask too much and are capricious, readily changing their demands. When these children fail to please selfish parents, they feel guilty. They berate themselves. They lose self-esteem and confidence. I remember hearing from a client years ago that said I could never count on anything. I'd get a B in a subject I was not adept at. And when the report card came and my parent was in a good mood, I was extolled. The next day I was absolutely torn down. And they told me I could bring it up to an A if I'd stop doing activities that I like to do. This is very confusing for a child, this kind of inconsistency. Do you realize that? That's confusing. Kids need a B to be a B to be a B to be a B, if you'll pardon the metaphor here. Omnipotent role children feel anxious. They get depressed and believe they are of little value for failing the selfish parent's demands. This puts them at risk for emotional illnesses like depression and academic failure and social withdrawal from friends, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse, eating disorders, withdrawal from society, isolation. Okay. Very important. Let's talk about impotent children, because this is another direction you can go. And I do sometimes wonder, and I didn't hear this article address this, but if you can have a little both, you know? I see some of my clients exhibiting both traits of impotent and omnipotent. Let's talk about impotence and what she says, though. The other emotionally conditioned role for children in the family is the impotent role. These children are raised differently from omnipotent children. Impotent refers to their unaware belief and actions of helplessness in their relationships. they are raised to be self-absorbed, like the self-centered parent. In this situation, they're two peas in a pod. Parent and child are alike in personality. And by the way, I will mention again, they're both victims. Yay! That actually makes the child feel good. They're just like the parent. That assures their survival. You see? And with this client to which I referred earlier that exhibits this, her mother's been dead 40 years. She's still doing it. She's alive and well inside her. An impotent parent and an impotent child robustly compete with each other. Each wants to be the top dog in relationship. Now, those are her words. I'm going to say each wants to be the best victim they can be as well. All right? So that's a little different spin on top dog, but nevertheless, it's true. Each wants his or her way. Young, impotent children are often bullied by their selfish parents with put-downs and name-calling. At other times, they may be the favored children, regarded by selfish parents as special. Why? Because they're just like them. This happens because the parents project their own specialness and self-centered view onto the child. So it's like looking in a mirror. I want to launch off a minute and say, again, this is another way that parents surround themselves with important people. Important person being just like them. Older impotent children and teenagers bully and fight back with their parent. They can create verbal and even physical conflict as they both erupt with demands to gain their way in a relationship. Impotent personality teens may run away from home, they may self-mutilate, abuse substances, become involved in legal trouble, are depressed. They're more likely to be outwardly volatile in their actions to a self-absorbed parent than the omnipotent personality children who curtail their emotional reactions. Now, difficulties follow both of these sets of kids in adult life. The effect of living with a self-absorbed parent, they don't vanish at the end of our childhoods. They follow us into adulthood. They continue to relate to other selfish people, these children, the same way they were emotionally conditioned to do as a child. You see? Science has discovered, psychology has discovered that omnipotent personality children often marry self-focused mates. They focus on pleasing and caring for their partner at the expense of themselves. They neglect themselves in the relationship. Often they walk on emotional eggshells, striving to never upset their mates. Guys, these are just people who haven't taken a chance on love, right? Who don't know what it is yet. They have been brainwashed, as has the impotent children. Oh, bless you, Jean. Jean is saying, laugh out loud explains my marriage and divorce. Well, yeah. You know, time to grow past this, girlfriend. All right. Impotent children may form the same high conflict relationships with selfish people. They will always be in a contest to get their way in a relationship. They may have frequent emotional blow-ups and even physical altercations. You know, I find it really interesting too, and I want you all to watch this. This is a little off this article, but I have a dear client who has just made the most wonderful strides in consciousness work I've ever seen. She's just opened like this magnificent flower. And I'm very, very proud of her. But the interesting thing that I heard over and over and over again when we were working in the early days is how her mother, who was absolutely a narcissist, she was diagnosable, kept calling her selfish. I think that's important for you to know, that people will call you what they are because they're projecting that onto you. That's what her mom did. You understand? She projected her own experience onto the child, when the child, of course, didn't capitulate to the mother all the time. It's grossly unfair, but it's the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to grow out of it. If every day was Christmas morning, guys, no matter what nationality or religious experience we have, if it was just wonderful every day, we'd never grow. These things serve a purpose. So, write some of these questions down. These are questions you might not have asked yourself before, but here's the basis of what you go in and you tell a counselor. And it's really important to face the truth as an individual. Here it is. How were you raised? How were you reared here? Were you indulged and allowed to have your way a great deal? Did other family members give in to your requests, demands, or tantrums, no matter how unreasonable they were? Do you expect others to meet your desires and never have a different opinion? Do you know how to negotiate something in loving harmony with another person when they don't feel the way you do? Can you find solutions that are right for everybody? Do you know how to do that yet? Because that is the way to do it. That's the emotionally mature way. You see, all work on the self does at first, before it teaches you your potential and where it is and opens you to it, and it comes out of you. It's nothing that anybody can give you. We can just make it available, help to get the things out of the way so it's available to you. But you've got to undo, the first step is to undo some of this emotional conditioning, because it's blocking the channel, right? If everything is energy, these are just energies you don't need anymore. That's really all it's about. I use this image. It's a simplistic one, but I use it all the time. And that is, so you have a beautiful garden. You're going to let it be overgrown with weeds? They're going to steal the nutrients from the plants you want to grow there. Well, the same thing is true in the emotional body. You've got things that don't belong there, like rage at your parents and how unfair and this and that and the other that need to be addressed. You've made some things good and some things that are bad, good. You've made some things that are good, bad. Psychologically, you're wired in your specific way in the ego child's mind. You've got to find out what those are and let them go energetically, right? So the plants, going back to that image, that belong there, like unconditional love and deep compassion and kindness and harmony with yourself and everything in the world, the oneness with all life and awe of this incredible system, and forgiveness, there's that word again, can take its place. Guys, we just can't expect in life to reach our potential without self-awareness and without changing. We are going to be changing and growing past the lies that you grew up believing from your childhoods. Those of you that are parents, I want to say this. It's never too late to work on yourself. Do you realize that when you work on yourself, what you're showing your children that are young or your children that are already adults is that there's a way out. There's a way out of misery. There's a way out of depression. There's a way out of everything. But you have to prove it to yourself first. Yeah. It's a loving thing to do, not just for yourself, but for them. Now, another article. 10 things emotionally neglected kids grow up believing that are simply not true. I love this article. This article is by a woman named Jonice Webb, Jonice Webb. I thought this was really quite a good article. So, quoting for her in the beginning, she says, growing up in an emotionally neglectful household takes its toll. Yep. And you receive covert messages that are never stated outright in many cases, but which will nevertheless guide you in your life going forward. She goes on to say, now I think there are some very overt messages as well, but the insidious ones are the covert ones, the ones that are not so offensive and abusive that you don't even notice them because they're habitual. Those are the ones that she says, and I agree, are very, very insidious. Silent, unintended, sometimes invisible. These messages take root easily and well and way too early. As you go through adolescence, they undermine your self-confidence and self-knowledge. And you should be gathering those things, by the way, in your adolescence. As you go into adulthood, they prevent you from making the choices that are right for you. As you form relationships and fall in love, they prevent you from valuing yourself. And you have children and you're raising them, and all of a sudden you feel weighed down and you are feeling mystified about what's missing from your life and why you aren't happy when it looks like you have everything you were supposed to do. The only way to reduce these insidious messages and their power over you is to realize them, to challenge them and how you got them, and to make conscious choices to not let them hold you back and actually take action that might be in a different direction. So let's go into these 10 lessons. Victims, that's a key word, of childhood emotional neglect. Learn early on, and how these lessons are just blooming wrong. Number 1, you learned it's not good to be too happy or too sad. She goes on to say that as a child, you naturally had intense feelings. And this is how children are wired. This is what children should do. Exuberant one moment, intensely frustrated the next. You need someone to teach you how to understand and manage your emotions. But what you got instead, if you had a parent like this, was a covert message that your emotions were somehow excessive. Do you realize all that is, nothing wrong with you, all that is a parent that doesn't know how to handle them, because they probably don't know how to handle their own. What you learned was to dampen your feelings. And you learned that instead of learning the skills to deal with those feelings in a really emotionally mature way. Wow! Isn't that something? So there are people walking around that just never let them feel a lot. I have them in my practice that say, I just never feel pleasure for anything. Well, one of the things that you do, you don't become too happy or you're sad, but the other thing you can do that's related to this is you focus on only the negative and what's lacking. Okay, so somebody comes along and says, you did a marvelous job on this project. yay you, and you go, yeah, and you dismiss it. And the next thought you have is, oh, I could have done better. I didn't give enough time. Look at what I don't do well. That too. Number 2, you're overly sensitive. That's another lesson you learned. That's not true either. As a child, you naturally felt upset when there was something to upset you. Give yourself credit for your feelings being appropriate at the time. You naturally felt angry when you were hurt or something made you so. What you needed was to have your upset feelings soothed by a parent that knew what they were doing and taught you how to soothe yourself from these. You needed a parent that taught you to look at all sides of the situation, look at perhaps where the other person was coming from too. What you got instead was that your feelings were weakness and that you were weak. If we take it one pathological step beyond that, my feelings are a weakness and I am weak because I have these feelings, you see. And you learn to judge yourself for having them. Guys, that's an overt lie. Give yourself credit, and we're still doing that with ourselves. Give yourself credit, because I hear a lot of people that are trying to be spiritual, and this is only in the early days, and this is with people that aren't with me. I'm going to tell you, because I'm going to challenge this, and that is, they'll say, oh, I shouldn't be angry. Something happened that really should make you angry. I shouldn't be angry. I'm a spiritual person. That's not the spiritual way to be. Well, all that is this. You're just trying to squash it down instead of giving yourself the ability to feel those feelings, let them out, and go on with a happy life. Somebody has to be the advocate for this kid that learned these erroneous messages. That advocate is you as the adult. You see? Here's the way to think about this in consciousness. Your feelings and feeling the way you're feeling is not weakness, and you are not weak for having them. You're human for having them. And if you're looking anywhere for your divinity, guess where it is? It is in the acceptance of your humanness. So when we judge ourselves, I can't believe I'm this way, we are actually going in the opposite direction from where you want to go when you listen to a show like this. This is about the acceptance of all of you. And if God is everything, the rage you feel as well as the love, it's all of that. One is just a higher frequency than the other. Do you realize that all rage is love? Let's release what you're enraged about. Let's find all that. Let's make our peace with it. So all that energy goes into who you really are. And everything is God. Don't you understand? Everything here is God. So all your emotions are God. All the words that we're so afraid of using because they're bad words, all of that's God in the high or low degrees. Don't you understand? So all you're doing when you are, what do I want to say, against yourself, like we're talking about right now, is you're pushing energy away that is God. It's not going to come back in rage that makes you go postal. It's going to come back to you as peace and love because you've put your arms around it. You've advocated for that poor child you were that learned this lesson. And now it's time to be fully who you are. This is your potential. You need all this energy back. And you resolve it. How do you resolve it? Well, that's what we do for a living here, and many people do this work. You resolve it You see the whole. You're not just the little kid that's suffering anymore and narrowing your focus on the suffering. You try to see what everything is and how reality really played out. And then you go, well, I don't need to keep this anymore. Number 3, here's something else you learned. Jean, I love you. You said working on it. That's just great. I'm so glad. Number 3, you learned your needs and preferences are irrelevant. As a child, you had needs. All children have needs. Everybody has needs. Everybody has needs. Why square off against your needs, except for bad parenting that told you to do so? You had things that felt important to you, and things that felt good and bad to you. What you needed was for someone to notice, someone to ask what you needed, what you wanted, someone to say, why do you feel that way? Have you thought of feeling this and this, which are part of that? Would you realize in that, had you had that kind of parenting, that you mattered? When no one asked, though, you learned instead that you didn't matter and that your needs and preferences were irrelevant. And guys, your needs and preferences are part of your potential, aren't they? You know, when I look back at my life, I'm doing the same things in a more sophisticated way, hopefully, that I did when I was young. I had those same things. Look back at your preteen time. That's a very creative time. And see what you were interested in. Why not pursue those things again? Why not take some courses? Why not see what's there for you now as an adult that you were interested in when you were 12, 13, 14 years old? I talked to someone about that recently, and she said I didn't have any preferences then. She had been so trained out of this by totally a narcissistic parent that she never did have this feeling. So she's discovering them now. Who is she? Of what use is she? Of what is turning on inside of her that she can add value to the world with, you see? This is how it works. Your potential lies right there. Number 4. You learned talking about a problem will unnecessarily burden other people. And let me tell you, if you were trained to do that in your childhood, not to talk about your feelings, you had parents that didn't know what to do with theirs. That's all it means. Growing up, you had problems with school, with siblings, with friends. What you needed was to know that you could talk to a parent, but instead, you knew that they, for whatever reason, couldn't handle it. What you learned was that others couldn't handle your problems. So, you'd best keep them to yourself. That's so lonely when help is all around. And I think it's so important for us to realize that. Help is all around. Caring people are all around. If you're not pulling in people like that, if you're pulling in your parents over and over again that were had these narcissistic, self-absorbed tendencies, look at what you still believe. It's bringing in these people so you will change and grow and get beyond it, or sink into the familiar, which I don't think anybody that's listening to the show wanted to do, you know? Number 5, you learn that crying is a weakness. All humans cry. We all have our reasons for crying. Crying is a way to release and process your emotions. It was really cute. I had a guy that was a real physical specimen at one time in an acting class of mine. And man, he was, strong and powerful. And I asked him in an interview one time, I said, "Do you cry?" And he said, "Yes, I cry." He says, "Crying is just releasing, how do you say this?" It was real cute. "It's just pressure valves for the heart. Tears are just pressure valves for the heart." That's what he said. I thought that was adorable. Well, in essence, he's right. If you want to buy that mechanical reference, it's a way to release and process emotion. As a child, you cried sometimes, and maybe you cried often. What you needed was for this to be okay. Instead, your family didn't know that crying had a purpose, and they ignored your tears, or they shamed you for having tears. Wow, that's not good. Perhaps they never showed tears themselves. Perhaps they were so suppressed that they couldn't deal with crying. Well, anyway, whatever the reason and whatever their stance, you learned that crying is negative and should be avoided. And that's a shame, because it's important sometimes. Makes you human, makes you dear in your humanness. Number 6. You learned that others will judge you for showing your feelings. In our childhoods, if you were with self-absorbed parents, you were judged for showing your feelings in your childhood home. The powerful message was carried forth within you. Hide your emotions from others is that message. Others will think less of you if you show them that you feel and are vulnerable. Or worse, if you show your feelings, people will use them against you because your family did. Guys, no. If you are with somebody that's using your feelings against you, instead of saying, "Now there's the truth, thank you, that is beautiful, and I'll honor that in you, absolutely. Now let's work out a solution that's mutually beneficial to all." It's just a calmer way to be, guys. And nobody should judge you for showing your feelings. Number 7, you learn that anger is a negative emotion and should be avoided. As a child, she goes on to say, you often felt angry because there's not a child walking the planet that isn't. It's a natural part of life. It's a natural part of life as an adult when somebody wrongs you. As a child, what you needed was a help to name and understand and manage your anger. Perhaps instead your anger was squelched or overwhelmed by another's force, like a father who was more angry than you, who shouted louder. Okay? Maybe you were punished for showing anger. What you learned was that anger is bad and that you should suppress it. Well, look, guys, I don't want any of you going postal. There's no reason for that. But there is a healthy way to learn to express your anger. There just is. If you don't feel that you know how to negotiate through a problem, work through a problem, you're going to be angry. If you don't know that you're going to get what you want in the end through a negotiation, you're going to be angry. If you are assuming that you're not and you never get anything you want, nobody cares about you, those are the two issues, of course, you're going to be angry. So isn't it wonderful to wake up to realize those things are not true? That There are people in this world that you absolutely matter to and that matter to you. That love is all around and that you can get what you want. You just have to go about it a healthy, happy way. An honest way, emotionally honest, you see? You learned, number 8, that relying on another is setting yourself up for disappointment. Whoa, a lot of kids, a lot of adults still feel this, you know? Children need help, period. You needed help when you were a kid. We all did. So, as a child, you needed support, direction, suggestions, assistance. Yeah, suggestions. Have you thought about it this way? Have you thought about it that way? What do you think they're feeling? What do you feel? But what happens with kids that learned that relying on others is setting them up for disappointment is your parents were not able to do any of that. You learned that it was best not to ask for help because you're setting yourself up to be let down. Okay. Is that the way it is now? If it is, we've got something to work out with you because that's not the way it is. There are loving people all around. 9, others are not interested in what you have to say. You learned that. She says that as a young child, you had endless wonder at the world around you. As you grew, you had endless things you wanted and needed to ask and to say and discuss, right? Yet talking was not valued in your family, and you were not asked or listened to, by the way. What you learned is that your questions and words were not valuable. You should keep them to yourself. Or even that you shouldn't even think them. Wow. Okay. We need to hear what everybody has to say. We need good parents teach you how to think correctly. A good therapist is going to have you think. Do you understand that that's one of the things that we do as therapists? We say, well, have you thought of it this way? There's another way to think of it. There are 5 ways to think of it. Which one do you want? And number 10, and this is a big one, you learn that you are alone in the world. As a child, you needed to feel that an adult had your back. That no matter what happened, there was support and help for you. Instead, when you needed something, you discovered that no adult was there because they were too busy, or they were overwhelmed, or they were unaware. What you learned was that you were all alone. Now look, I want to go back to what I said before about the client that made excuses for her parent. Sweetie, let's say if you're a single parent, I get it. I get how busy you are. I understand that. I get how busy your parent was. But that doesn't stop you from saying they should have been there for me too. I just didn't have that. And for you now to make sure that you have it in your life and that you are listening and that you are not alone and that you are relying on others and reaching for others. Certainly, I say if you can provide it for yourself, do. But the whole joy of relationship is giving and taking in a relationship, isn't it? That's part of love. So what happens when one of the partners excludes the other? Because they feel all alone. They've always been alone. That's no reason to go forward with that. It's actually diminishing a lovely quality of love, which is give and take. These lessons, these 10 lessons that I've just read to you, seem so real and so true. But you know what? They're all lies. You're not alone in the world. Nothing else of this list is true. They are brainwashing that you learned from your family in an overt or covert manner. That's all it is. And you should challenge them now, because this isn't a happy life. You're diminishing love. The love that you have to give other people. The love that they have to give you. The truth is that strong feelings connect us to ourselves and to each other, and that being able to have them is a sign of health and strength and balance. Knowing your own needs and preferences and expressing them is a key to living a happy and fulfilling life. This writer goes on to say that talking about your problem helps you solve them. Get it out of your head, darling. Share it with somebody. Silly metaphor is that 4 shoulders are stronger than 2. Crying is a healthy way of coping. It's a healthy way of coping. It's available to us all. It's like free therapy, right? Letting others see your feelings helps them know you better. And if you balk at that one, let me tell you, you've got some erroneous ideas about yourself, because you are here for a purpose. If you're listening to a show like this, you want to be more and more conscious. You want to be loving. You see the child's mind, you see the adult mind. So what in the world are you hiding from people about? Why would you do that? Let's take a chance on somebody loving you. And let's love others in a real pure and non-manipulative way. Anger is an important message from your body. It's very important. All it is, it's like anxiety. It's a sign that says, look here. What's pissing you off about this? Resolve it. I think of a client of mine who came in one time, and he was very upset because a car had cut him off in traffic. Now, he didn't know the person in that car, right? But it had cut him off in traffic, and it had made him afraid. And he came in and he was furious. And he sat down, and I said, well, what's this about? This isn't about that car cutting you off in traffic. It's about 10% of that. But what's really pissing you off here? And he got real quiet. And then he said, you know what it is? It's that my father didn't care about me and my feelings. My father made me afraid a lot of times. Now, that's good work, guys, to realize that. You see? The next one is mutual dependence. It's a form of teamwork. It makes you stronger, not weaker. Yeah, all of us can make it on our own. Yeah, all of us can do all of that. But why? Why would you not share with a loving partner who loves you more than anything in the world? Why would you just try to go it alone? Why would you not trust trusted friends? You see? Hi, Michelle. Good. Michelle said, I am really getting to know me, and I really like me and my willingness to learn and improve. Isn't that the most wonderful thing about all of us that want to do that? I think that's one of the most admirable traits there is let us learn and improve. Let us open. You know, I am constantly interested in what I'm writing next. You know, I don't have an ego around what I've just written. I really am thrilled about the next thing. My husband's building a boat in the basement. I mean, isn't that marvelous at our age that we're interested in doing new things, learning new stuff? It's very exciting. So good for you, Michelle. Keep growing, keep learning. Something else to know out of all this kind of childhood is that what you have to say is important. You should say it. You should learn to say it well, though. Good for you, Michelle. Thank you. You should learn to say it better, though. I know people that are dear, but they always think they're basing their whatever they say on the fact that they think they're not going to get what they want. So they're very harsh when they say things. You don't need to do that, darlings. You just need to learn the right way to say it. A good therapist can help you with that, too. A loving way to say it. And last but not least, she says, you're human. You are connected. You are important. And you are not, by any stretch of the imagination, alone. You are not alone. You should not work alone. You should not be alone with your emotions. You should not, guys, take a chance on something other than your brainwashing as a child. You don't have to be alone anymore. Let's all take advantage of that, okay? In a good way, in a wholesome way, in a balanced way. Let's reach out. Let's love people. Let's accept their love in return. Suppose you work from the premise that nothing's ever been wrong with you, that you're okay, that you are moving toward the grace and wisdom and love of God as who you are, as a deep and conscious human being. And you're getting beyond all these little girl and boy issues. I think that's a good way of living. Darlings, we're going to stop there. I want to say thank you so much for being with me today. We're going to talk about being rejection sensitive next week. I think that's a really good thing for us to talk about. Some people are and never get on with life because they are rejection sensitive. We're going to talk about how to get over that. Sweeties, concerning what we talked about today, believe it or not, at one point when we resolve our issues of bad parenting that we had, or at least unconscious parenting, we must realize that we are the parent to ourselves. That it doesn't matter what we've come from. What matters is what you're doing with it in this literal moment today. And I hope you'll make it a good one for yourselves. I hope you'll love extra strong. I hope you'll receive love extra strong and allow it in. And that you realize you are not at all alone. That's there for you too. Ego child's mind, I'm all alone. Adult mind, I'm connected to everything and everybody in this world. And there's a oneness with all life. And I am participating. Yeah. Thank you so much too. I have to put on the table, I want to thank you for all that you all have done in terms of getting the word around about these shows. We rely on word of mouth and on social media to get the word around about these shows. So thank you so much indeed. You know, all these shows are archived on Blog Talk Radio, Facebook Live, and YouTube. So if you miss anything, you can go back and hear on a variety of subjects. Gosh, I don't know how many. I've been doing this for years, so I don't know how many there are out there, but a lot. So you can find just about anything you're interested in. And I want to thank you so much for continuing to get the word out about us. We really appreciate it. Let's do a prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for all of this information, for who we are and what we are and where we're going and what we're becoming. We thank you for it all. It's a magnificent system, one that we are awed by. Open us to the way it all works, that we may cooperate with the flow of you in the highest level, that we may challenge the lies that we've learned to tell ourselves, that we may move with you in a grace-filled way. We thank you so much as we now surrender all of these issues and blocks and needs to hold on to them, all vestiges and related issues, all identities, over-identities, sympathies and over-sympathies that we've learned. We ask now that we open to a more authentic and inspired level of us as the energy of love. We thank you so much, dear God, and we say this prayer in your name and in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, and in the name of each and every person listening to the show today. Thank you, and so it is. Amen. Okay, kiddos, see you next week, all right? Take care, and thank you so much for being part of the show and all your wonderful comments. It's all doable, and you all are all doing it. Okay, take care. God bless you. Oops.